Hi, my name's Emily Rose Adams. Welcome to Presently Presents.
I would say just persistence is key, firstly. And secondly, ideas. Like if you come with an amazing idea and they like it, they will probably commission it. But I just find it so exciting. It's that kind of stuff that I want to do. I want to be pushed. I want to put myself into positions where I'm experiencing new things.
Hello, welcome to our next episode of Presently Presents. I'm Emily, the founder of Presently and the host, and today's episode features someone with one of the coolest jobs on the planet. She's an experienced producer, presenter, and a director with a passion for investigative journalism and documentary making. She works for Vice, creating hard-hitting content. Her work has been viewed millions of times online, and she's created amazing videos on controversial topics like investigations into cannabis growers, children buying drugs, and even conversations with geriatric ravers. She's passionate about rave culture and music and is constantly pitching stories and ideas to turn into amazing documentaries, creating honest and edgy content. Today's Presently Presents guest is Tir Dhondy. Hey Tir, how's it going?
That was a great introduction. Thanks so much. Very professional, loved it.
Would you like me to follow you around in life with that introduction?
Yeah, it'd be amazing.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, great. Really, really excited to have you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for joining.
No problem.
I came across you online. I actually watched your geriatric ravers Vice episode on YouTube. And I absolutely love Vice, by the way. Like I do a bit of journalism stuff. And for me, that's like, it's just those binge-worthy like documentaries. So interesting, so edgy and cool. So I was really excited to be able to speak to you today. What does like the average day look like for you? So when you're working for Vice, you're coming up with ideas and creating a documentary. How does that look?
Yeah, so I work on the digital team at Vice, which is actually really small. Everybody always thinks it's quite big, but it's quite small. There's about 8 of us that do the sort of development and creative parts of the documentaries team. So our role is to basically do everything in terms of make the documentary. So we think of the idea, we get the access, which means we find the people and we cast the characters, and then we set up the shoots. We go to the shoots. A lot of the people on our team can shoot as well, so they know how to work a camera, and then we put it all together. We have an edit suite in Vice, and then we see it through to the edit, to the final stages. So yeah, it is nice. We get to take the documentary right from the start, right until the end. And a lot of the documentaries that we make are our ideas. We go through a kind of pitching process, and it's fun because we can pitch whatever we want, really, whenever we want. Obviously, some people are like, I found this really good story in Thailand. Can we please go to Thailand? And if it's a good enough story, we can. Which is great, and one of the benefits of working at Vice. But yeah, that's sort of our main job, is thinking of ideas, finding the people, and then literally just filming it.
That's amazing. So I guess your role is very much creative. It's not just being in front of the camera. It's producing, it's coming up with ideas, which is quite an unusual job, because I think a lot of presenters, they turn up on set, they're given a script, they read autocue, and I think if you do journalism, you do have to do it like other things. You create some of the content as well, but for you, this is really a like well-rounded role. How did you get into the presenting side of it?
So I wouldn't say it was your classic presenting route that a lot of people go down. So my background is I started off working in television, in documentaries and in reality TV. I did a stint at Say Yes to the Dress, where I was casting the brides for that. And then I worked in Specialist Factual, where I did a documentary on Oscar Wilde, one on Princess Diana. And that kind of made me learn how productions work, which of course really, really helps when it comes to presenting. When I joined Vice as a researcher. So my job was, researching ideas, researching people, researching, because a lot of the time, obviously, documentaries, they have a lot of fact checking to do. So I was doing the research to do with the fact checking. And then after a while of working at Vice, I think one of my bosses heard me on the call to people, because I was, cold calling contributors and saying, this is a documentary we're doing, would you like to, be part of it? And he was like, oh, I think you'd be quite good on camera. So then I did a screen test, which went well. And then the first documentary that I presented was for our series called High Society, which is a series on drugs. A lot of Vice content is on drugs. A lot of the stuff that I work on is on drugs, but it's really fun. You get to kind of travel with it, and you get to go into really weird and interesting scenarios. So yeah, the first one that I did, I was actually really thrown in the deep end. It was on kids buying drugs over Snapchat. And for the documentary, I had to interview a mum whose 15-year-old daughter had died because of an MDMA overdose. I was interviewing drug dealers. And that was my first one. And since then, I absolutely loved it. And there's I guess it's not usual for someone to be a producer and a presenter at the same time, but they do really go hand in hand, because you know how everything works. You sort of know what it's going to be like in the edit, and what would be helpful for the director or whoever's editing it. And you also have set up all the characters yourself, so you know what to expect, and you know the story back to front, because a lot of presenting, it helps to have done so much research into the topic, so you know it like the back of your hand. And once you sort of know that information, and then you can take it into the shoot, that's obviously really beneficial.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's really useful, and I think a lot of presenters who, myself included when I started presenting, thought, I just want to be a presenter. But later down the line, I realized that actually being a journalist and a presenter and producing as well, it really works for, especially if you're doing news kind of content, because you know the story, you know the whole story. You feel confident going off script, if you are doing a scripted piece, and I feel like you can give it a bit more conviction when you've really researched and you know the whole process. So it's really amazing what you're doing. And like, as I said, the Vice content is so edgy. It's really educational. It's really cool stuff, and I think your job is very uncommon. There's not many media outlets who cover those kind of topics. Is it something you always wanted to do? So when you were younger, did you want to get in front of the camera? Did you want to be making documentaries? Or is it, as you said, you went as a researcher and you kind of fell into it?
I didn't necessarily always want to be in front of the camera, but I really wanted to direct. And at Vice, I would classify myself as a presenter and producer, but I've just started directing as well, which is really exciting. But yeah, I would say I wanted to direct when I was younger. And to be honest, it sounds really cringe, but I did always want to work for Vice Media, just because I think it's the kind of content that I want to watch. It's very suited to me. And yeah, I basically just hounded one of the guys, Alex Hoffman, he doesn't work there anymore, for a while. Just kept emailing him like, can you hire me now? Can you hire me now? And I went in for an interview with him, and he said, you're great, but we don't have any spaces. And then within 6 months, he called me and he was like, someone's just left. Do you want to come in? So yeah, when anyone always asks me like, how do I get into Vice? I would say just persistence is key, firstly. And secondly, ideas. Like, if you come with an amazing idea and they like it, they will probably commission it, and you'll probably get to work on it, and then you'll get a credit and you'll just go from there. And that was one of the main things that I did. I went into that meeting with so many ideas. And that is 100% a way to get in. And it's probably the same with most companies. If you've got a good enough idea and you've got the access, meaning you've got the people to take part in it, and it's unique and you have the access that no one else might be able to get, then you'll probably get a commission.
Yeah, and on that topic of ideas, with your work, you mentioned that you're kind of with your colleagues and you kind of chat and come up with ideas. Is that how it works? How do you come up with these ideas? I mean, for some people it probably comes more naturally. Do you get inspiration from other stories? Do you get people sort of sending you press releases? Like, how, in terms of the stories you've covered, how have they worked?
Yeah, so it is really a mixture of different things. So sometimes we'll have a series, say, that they want us to pitch for. So say the series is about sex, then all of us will kind of go off and think of stories that are to do with sex. And the way that I usually find my stories is I type in keywords into Google, look at newspaper articles, see if that kind of inspires me to think of anything else. But stories come from everything. It's like you can be on a shoot and you'll meet someone who's a bit of a crazy character and he'll start telling you about something random, and then suddenly you've got a story out of that. Or even you can be at a festival and you can meet someone and they'll sort of start talking about something they've been doing. And I've actually found a lot of my high society characters through festivals. But in terms of thinking of stories, I would say, yeah, read as much as you can, listen to as much as you can podcast wise. Definitely it helps to read the news. Like, we couldn't really do our job without reading the news. And see if it inspires anything.
Yeah, I think hearing stories and places like Twitter, I guess, you just kind of hearing like personal stories, experiences, I'm sure all of that really comes into it. And yeah, like the drug side of it, it's something I think that a lot of people like are unaware of how it goes on in that kind of scene and how it operates. So I think it's really amazing that Vice covers those types of topics. But I guess it does put you in slightly vulnerable and maybe uncomfortable positions at times. You mentioned that you might travel. I think I saw one episode where one of your colleagues was with like cartel members and putting themselves really on the line like that. How does that feel when you're kind of putting yourself out there in these exposed and vulnerable positions?
Honestly, it might sound a bit silly, but I just find it so exciting. It's that kind of stuff that I want to do. I want to be pushed. I want to put myself into positions where I'm experiencing new things. And really, I guess, although they're kind of doing dangerous things, you just have to humanize them as much as possible, and usually we end up getting along with them quite well. And it's rarely ever hostile, but we do have a lot of kind of, legal meetings and all these kind of things before we go on these sort of shoots. We have a driver who is ready if anything goes wrong. It's because it's such a big corporation now, the way that they set up these shoots are usually quite thought out and careful, so we do know that most of the time we're probably going to be safe if anything happened.
And also, like, reaching these people, that's one of the things that goes through my head. I was thinking, how did you even get in touch with these guys? Like, your connections must be amazing.
I know. So after a while of working at Vice, you generally do end up having so many connections. But what most people sort of ask is, how do you get into the criminal underworld? And the answer is usually through a fixer. So we have these things called fixers, who are people within that world that we hire, and they can kind of get our contributors for us. So, for example, if we say we want to do a documentary on the mafia, we would get someone who is really close to the mafia to help us. It would be a job, we'd pay them. They wouldn't be so much a criminal themselves. They might be a journalist who's written a book about the mafia and has made connections with them, and then they would come on the shoots with us. They'd be able to speak their language. It would make the situation a lot less hostile, a lot more comfortable, and that's usually how we do that kind of thing. So a lot of our dealers and criminals come from fixers. Yeah.
Hey folks, Emily here, and I'm interrupting this fascinating conversation to remind you that if you want access to the best jobs in the industry, there's no better way to find them than to sign up to Presently. There you can create a free profile page and then subscribe to start applying for the most exclusive jobs for presenters, voiceover artists, and more. And right now we're offering a 14-day free trial, so check it out. That's presently.com. And now back to our conversation. So when you've been on your shoots, have you had any moments where you've thought, okay, this is getting a bit hairy, like kind of thinking about your options, or have you kind of just been kind of calm about the whole thing?
Yeah, there's been a few times. People have got Larry. There's a lot of times where people have got Larry, and you just have to try and calm them down, especially when people are on drugs and stuff. It just gets a bit out of hand. I was once driving a van, and I was driving one of our contributors in the back, and he was just completely off his face, and he was screaming and shaking my chair and things like that. So that was just the first thing that comes to mind. But other than that, it hasn't been too bad. I mean, I've heard of horror stories, but luckily it hasn't happened to me yet.
Yeah, that's good to know. And I guess when you're talking to these people as well, you were the episode that I saw you in, you were so natural. It was literally like you were just talking to a friend. And I think with documentaries, that's the style. It's basically real life, showing you exactly who these people are and what their lives look like. Is that just you? Like, do you feel like you're just forgetting that the camera's there, or do you have any like advice for how you kind of stay cool and just sort of natural and relaxed in those situations?
It's a good question, because it is so hard. And I remember when I first started out, like my initial screen test, I was very presentery, and I was, hi, my name's Tir, and da-da-da. And Vice is so strict on how they want their presenters to be natural as possible, and for it to feel like the camera isn't even there. So it is something that I crafted the more experience that I got. But my tips for that would be pieces to camera. You have to just be as natural as possible and speak to the camera as if you're talking to the director, who's your friend behind the camera. And the director who I often work with is really good, and he just asks me questions and then I answer the questions, and that's a way of just making it as natural as possible. We try to rarely ever write scripts, because when we write scripts in our head, we have to kind of stick to them, and that means that we remember them, and then it becomes a little more natural. So yeah, just try and know what you're saying. So you've done your research, you know kind of what points you want to hit. But if you could just try and freestyle as much as possible, that's probably the better thing to do, I would say, in my opinion. But of course, everybody's different.
Yeah, no, that's some really good advice. And in terms of like your guests who you speak to, how do you kind of bring out the best? Because with these, I guess you probably have a lot of footage which in the edit doesn't make it, but there are some really amazing, like honest, raw questions and answers that you get from these people. Do you have any advice for like how you make the person being interviewed? Obviously, if they're taking drugs, they might be quite relaxed anyway. But in those situations, how do you kind of feel like you can get good answers from your interviewees?
I guess it's just before the cameras roll, you just make them feel as comfortable as possible. It's a relationship at the end of the day, and I think a lot of people, before we turn up on the shoot, they expect us to be like middle-aged white men, and then they're always like, oh, you guys are really cool, you're like really young, and because everybody at Vice is quite similar to one another, and yeah, we just make them feel as comfortable as possible. And most of the time we sort of just chill with them for a little bit beforehand, chat to them, make them feel at ease before the cameras start rolling. I think it would be quite difficult to go in straight away and start filming, because people just get a bit freaked out. We're also a really small team. There's only like 3 of us on each shoot, max 4. So it's really unobtrusive. Like, I think it would be quite scary if there was like a huge, set suddenly turns up at their doorstep. But we go to, we follow them around at festivals, we get along with people. So I think, yeah, just chat to them beforehand. And then you can obviously let them know that they can stop at any point and all of that kind of stuff, which I think helps to make people feel more comfortable. But that's really all I can think of, to be honest, for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess the way that the documentaries that you work on are made, it kind of feels like you're just picking up the conversation, as you said. So maybe you're chatting before the camera's rolling. So it kind of just looks like you're just a fly on the wall in the real situation. And yeah, it's a really interesting style of presenting. But I guess for those who who want to do that kind of presenting work, there aren't many, open opportunities. I think there was some kind of Louis Theroux style competition that happened this year. But apart from that, like, it's quite rare. And if you're starting out, would you suggest like making your own documentary style content for YouTube or something? Do you think that would be a good way in to kind of show these companies like an example of your ideas and things that you would like to create?
Yeah, I think making your own content is never a bad idea. It is just hard, isn't it? Because you have to fund it, and I completely understand that. I mean, like, I haven't really even done my own content. I've just done it at work. I hope to, but to be honest, I would say it's all about coming up with your own ideas. If you can come up with your own idea that's amazing, and email it to me. My email is tir.dhondy@vice.com, and it's good. The chances are you'll get to work on it and they will commission it. And like, Vice are very open to finding new talent as well and stuff. I think, if you're good and you've got a particular niche, so say, you're a really good foodie, or your kind of passion is crime, or you love computer games, that sort of thing also helps, because then they'll instantly think of you when we've got a certain topic that we're covering.
Amazing. I feel like you've just given a good opportunity to everyone. Pitch your ideas, people. Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. I guess if you've got those ideas and you can execute it, and you guys have got the resources, so it's an amazing piece of advice. And I'm sure there's lots of people listening right now who would love to give that a go. So we've mentioned a few of the stories that you've worked on over the last few years, which are all just amazing and so interesting. What's been your favorite piece that you've put out there? Which, by the way, the views on these videos are like in the millions, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. The Gravers one was the best that we've ever got. It just got 1 million in 24 hours, which was amazing. And now it keeps going up, and it's so great. I was really chuffed with that one. But the best one I've worked on isn't out yet. But we filmed it at the beginning of this year, and I went to Thailand, and I spent 2 weeks. 2 weeks, and I don't want to say, just in case. No, I think I can say. So I went to Thailand, and I spent 2 weeks in Koh Phangan, which is an island. And on one side of Koh Phangan you have the full moon parties, and on the other side you have this tantric conscious community. Who are a lot of Westerners who have moved there, and they are exploring Tantra, which is an umbrella term for sort of yoga, meditation, but it's often incorporated into sex, and they get really, really kinky. And I went on my own journey to see if I could heal sexual trauma through Tantra. So I enrolled myself in all of the courses, each workshop, and got really immersed within that community. And I think watching it back now, it's probably the craziest thing I've ever done. And it's so kind of, removed from our society. A lot of the scenes that we managed to film were pretty wacky. So I think it's going to be a really good one. So yeah, that was my favourite.
But that's what makes these documentaries so amazing and addictive to watch. It's just these incredible scenarios that you would never normally see, which is what's so great about it. But I guess in that scenario, you're putting yourself, your person, because you mentioned that you went into your own experiences for that one. So did that feel hard to do, like to kind of put your own emotions and feelings on camera?
Yeah, definitely. It's not something that I've done before, and it was a journey that was very personal to me. But watching it back now, I'm really happy with it, and there's nothing that I look at and I'm like, I really cringe at that. It will just be interesting, probably, because obviously we get thousands of comments, and I'm sure people can relate. It's the worst part of the job, is like seeing people just slating you online. And I think maybe that's probably what's going to get me the most about that story, is because it's quite personal to me. It will probably feel a lot harder when I see negative comments, but it's fine. Just got to brush past them. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, I know it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because we've all come to the conclusion that we have to just brush past it, as you said, and ignore it. But it is something that can be quite challenging, especially, I guess, for topics like this one where you're really putting yourself on the line. And how do you deal with that? So if you do see comments, do you have any advice for your mental process? Because I know everyone deals with this situation very differently. But for you, what would you say kind of helps?
Just don't read them.
Yeah.
But it's so hard, and I don't take my own advice. I mean, even when I can see that comments are going one way, which is mostly negative, I will sit down and read all of them. It's just something that I do, and it's not good, and I get myself into a bit of a tizzy, but I just think, just don't read them would be my advice.
Yeah. I have the same advice too. Yeah, it's especially when you're doing stuff like news as well. I think for me, when I do like news updates and bulletins, and for me it's really like, well, my job is to give you accurate updates about the world and what's happening, and I don't really want to be criticized about my hair or whatever it is. It just seems so silly, but it happens, I guess. So I think ignoring it is the best thing to do if you can, but it's not always that easy, is it?
No, it's
not. So what is next for Tir Dhondy, would you say, in terms of, like, you said you were starting to do some directing, like, have you got kind of any ideas about what you want to do with that?
Yeah, so I'm directing a film at the moment which is on young men taking steroids. So yeah, it's a film about, mental health, body stereotypes, and then it's also exploring the drug. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm also working on a few different crime documentaries. I've got one coming out soon, which I'm presenting, which is on, like, people robbing from influencers because of what they post online. So that's going to be coming out soon. Wow. Yeah, I interviewed Kim Kardashian's robber, which was...
That's insane.
Yeah.
As in the one from, like, Paris?
Yeah. So we went to Paris
to
go and meet him. So yeah, that's coming out soon. Amazing. And then I'm also just trying to pitch to other companies as well, because I would love to present for Channel 4 or BBC or somewhere like that. So that's sort of my next step as well.
Amazing. I think it's always good to have these, like, goals and things to work towards, so you can just keep progressing with all of that. But it sounds like your experience at Vice has been amazing, and you've covered, like, topics that are just so interesting and thrilling to work on. So your job is, like, extremely, extremely rare and very, very cool. And I think a lot of people will be really loving hearing about what you've been up to. So we've touched a little bit upon, like, how to get into it, but what would be your 3 top things for any presenter who's looking to get into documentary making? What would be your 3 top tips for them? Yeah,
think of ideas and pitch them. Definitely read as much as you can in terms of news. Always keep your eye on what's going on in the world, and also, like, untold stories and fringes is what people are really interested in. And then my 3rd, to get into presenting is the question, is it? I mean, probably make your own content, but it's not something that I've done yet. So you practice what you preach. But I mean, if you make your own content and you start getting views and followers, it's obviously going to be great. And then you can kind of build your brand. And then from that, you could approach someone like Vice and be like, look, this is what I do. Do you have any sort of documentaries that would be suited to me, sort of thing?
Amazing. Tir, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for telling us all about what you get up to. And yeah, where can we follow you on Instagram and places?
So yeah, on Instagram, it's just Tir Dhondy, spelled TIR space Dhondy, DHONDY.
Amazing. Thank you. I genuinely can't wait to see your next episodes that come out later on in the year.
Thank you so much. And yeah, thanks for having me. It's been nice. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. That's it for today's Presently Presents podcast episode. Thank you so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed hearing all about Tir and her job. I loved speaking to her. I really do think she's got an amazing and cool job. And hopefully you've gained some great advice from her. Please do take her up on her offer as well for pitching story ideas. So if you've got any great ideas, that's a really good opportunity that she put forward on the episode. And make sure you subscribe and leave a comment if you fancy, because we will be back very soon with some more episodes.